All right, coaches, what's going on? Corey Harris here. We're back in the building, one-on-one with my man Chris Kreider, Coach Chris Kreider, excuse me, from SMU. Chris is one of those authentic and genuine people that you really don't meet every day. I don't know if you remember, Coach, but we met at a coaching clinic that was taking place at Georgia State, and you were sitting next to me. I had no idea who you were, and I don't know if it was you who initiated the conversation or me, but it was a break in between speakers. And you were kind enough, now I remember, you were kind enough to turn to me, ask me some questions about who I was, where I was from. And again, I had no idea you were one of the keynote speakers at the event. But you gave me your card, and then like right after this guy gives me his card, he walks up to the front and he starts his speech. So, he could have been doing anything. He could have been going over what he was going to say, his notes, but he was cool as a fan, man. He just like kind of slid right up to the front and shut the place down. So, Coach Chris, it's an honor to have you. We really appreciate it.
No, Corey, great to see you again. Hopefully everything's good back in Atlanta, man. I miss Atlanta. Spent a lot of time there. My wife's from there, so it's always a second home. But no, I think I appreciate those kind words, but right back at you, man. I think what you're doing, with this whole transition segment and all this stuff you're doing on social media and all this stuff is really good for us coaches. Cause I think, you referenced the clinic, but that's what it's about, getting better and learning and meeting people and, picking up new ideas. So whatever level we're coaching at today, I just think it's always about continuing to push forward and get better and improving our craft.
For sure, for sure. No, I love that. And Coach, let me kind of just stay right there on that point and ask you a question. How do you focus on your own personal development, in the off seasons or even during the season? Like, what's your kind of philosophy on getting better every year as a coach?
Yeah, I think I guess having done it, now guess man, over 20 years now, getting old, but what I've found is that the quicker you can figure out as a coach what it takes for you to be successful. And what I mean is, we're all unique and we all learn different ways. I used to actually teach high school Spanish and majored in education. And so I reference that just because I think it's the same thing where we say we're coaches and we all would say that's, the teaching part of it is something we enjoy doing. And, if you ever stop improving as a coach, then that's when you need to do something else. So for me, what I've tried to do is realize what makes me tick. And so I've worked with a lot of good assistant coaches, and I've tried to learn things from each one of them. So I'll just name a couple things, I guess, having a notebook. So I got a stack of notebooks in my office, one every year. I'm writing things down as I learn them. It might be a quote, a set, something, someone did that I liked, something I didn't like. So I think writing everything down. Number two, just staying organized. And, with technology now, collecting things, whether it's social media, YouTube, video edits. Once you see something you like, save it. But how are you storing it? How are you keeping on to all this stuff? And so what I've tried to really get better at in the last couple of years, I say the last 5 years or so, is just archiving things, having libraries of things, and just staying organized with what the things that you do learn. So I'm a color coordinated type of guy. So I have to coordinate things a certain way, but only just because that's the only way I can retain information. So I guess I'm trying to tie it in, like whatever makes you learn, whatever helps you remember, whatever it is, player development, offense, defense, recruiting. Like for me, some responsibilities I have as an assistant coach: recruiting, scheduling, academic monitoring. All that stuff is just straight collecting information. So how do you keep track of all that? Well, in my mind, I can only do it a certain way for it to make sense so I can keep my job. So I think as a coach, you just have to find that. But the sooner you can find what works for you, the better.
Love it, love it. So without us, I guess, taking too much of the time to just like go back and talk about a little bit of your journey, kind of let us know like how you got started coaching, like when did the bug bite you, and you kind of figured out this is what I want to do.
Yeah, I think I feel like I knew I wanted to coach when I was, finishing up my college playing career. Played Division III basketball, finished up at the Division III level in Pennsylvania. Had a roommate who wanted to get into coaching. I had lived, long story short, lived with a friend of mine growing up, and his dad was our high school coach. So between living with the coach, having a really good friend that wanted to coach, I felt like that's what I wanted to do. But then, I met this girl who's now my wife, Heather, in Atlanta. And we did, she allowed me to coach. I coached at St. Francis High School there in Alpharetta for 3 years,
Okay.
coach girls, coach boys. And I just, after 3 years of coaching, I didn't know how she was going to be with everything, because she didn't play and didn't know what the deal was. So it was a funny story. Vince Alexander, who's now the head coach at Clayton State there in Atlanta, he was the head coach at USC Aiken at the time. I had played for him at Mansfield University, went to a game, watched his team at USC Aiken. They were really good at the time. Talking to him after the game and just told him I wanted to get into college coaching. And he said, yeah, if you want to volunteer, just, let me know. You got a spot over here. So long story short, I had to volunteer at USC Aiken Division II, was able to sneak into Georgia Tech as a volunteer for a year. Did that for two. So volunteered for 2 years. And my wife, extremely
Wow.
supportive. And then just caught a break, man. I think the longer you do this, we all do this, I personally, my faith, I view it a certain way. I feel like God opened the door for me and
Yes, sir.
at Georgia Tech. And that turned into an administrative job, answering the phones, working the office at Tech. And then when CY, an assistant at Missouri now, when CY got the job at Georgia Southern, he was, gracious enough to extend to me an opportunity to get on the road as an assistant. And that was the first, opportunity I got. So every step of the way, I just say my wife allowed me to kind of go down this road that, for 20 years, we've moved who knows how many times, 8, 9 schools now, whatever, just kind of living this coaching thing. And it can be a crazy profession, but, definitely have a passion for it.
Love that. Love that. So the theme that we're focusing on, coaches, all you guys that are listening, is perspective. And this is from Coach Chris to me when he was asked what did he want to focus on. So, Coach, I've only got a handful of perspective questions, but you can take it and run with it however you want. So my first question for you in regards to perspective is, what is your perspective on the good or the character of a good coach? Like, what makes a good coach to you? And you alluded to it earlier a little bit.
Yeah, I think always referencing when I coach, I try to always view it through the player's eyes. So it seemed like a long time ago now, used to play. And I just remember what it was like, the guys I liked playing for and the guys I learned a lot from, looking back about the game, about life. And, I choose to view it through that lens, whether that's in the gym working a guy out or doing every part of this job as an assistant coach at the college level. But I just think if we can always, as coaches, maintain that perspective, that's really what it's about. Always trying to remember that, there's life after basketball. It's bigger than basketball. Those are cliche phrases, but I really try to stick to that. And that's why deep down I do this personally. So I just think the guys that I've been fortunate to work for and work alongside of, they all have different styles. And that's probably the biggest thing that I've learned in these 20 years is there's so many different ways to do it. You have to be authentic to who you are. I can't try to be anyone. I have to be myself the same way. I would encourage everyone else to do that because, when it comes to player relationships, I feel like those, your players can sniff you out if you're not being authentic. You lose credibility in a lot of different ways if you try to go down that road. And before you know it, you just get lost and, you don't know who you really are. So I think in a profession where taking shortcuts can kind of be tempting, I think, whether that's recruiting or just whatever, just trying to do the right thing and maintaining that proper perspective. And as an assistant coach, working for guys that you respect and working for guys that you share their vision. And then when if you're fortunate enough to be a head coach, then you set the tone, for what standards you want. But I've been fortunate to work for some really good guys over the years.
You've probably seen a lot of different combinations within the staffs you've worked on, what is your perspective of a good assistant and someone that any head coach, regardless of their philosophy or style, would say, I want that guy in a foxhole with me?
Yeah, you have to, you just can't be a good dude. Like, you got to get the
Mhm.
job done at the end of the day. You have to work, and you have to know what it is that, every head coach tries to fill his staff a certain way. So is he looking for more of a recruiter, more of a, offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator type, or a workout guy? So sometimes it's pretty specific about what the role is. But I think being a good person and doing the right thing, yes, that's very important, but you have to work at your craft and improve and show that you can get the job done as well. I think the ability to get along with everybody, you know, top to bottom, athletic department wide, student athletes, uh, the ability to develop new relationships. So you might take a job, personally, I've worked in the DMV, I've worked in Atlanta, Houston, Dallas, Statesboro, Georgia, Lexington, Virginia. So you have to be able to adapt pretty fast and develop a network. And, your job is to take things off the head coach's plate at the end of the day.
Okay.
He wants to make sure that you can help him be successful. That's really what it's about.
That's a big one. That last one. I'm pretty sure there are so many things that don't even make it to Coach Rob that you're dealing with, fires you're putting out, things you have to answer, solutions you have to find. So, coaches, if you heard that one, make sure, like, even now, if you're not an assistant coach yet or you're an aspiring coach on the college level, that you think about taking the load even off just your family members, off the people around you who trust you, who need you, because you're practicing that same skill that you have to use every day as an assistant on the college level or any other level. So, Coach Chris, what is your perspective on communicating and relating to this generation? Because, like you say, you've been in it for 20 years now. I'm sure you've seen the evolution of the player, right? A couple times, a handful of times. So, how do you deal with that?
Yeah, have tried to adapt, and probably could get better, in some areas, obviously, and want to continue to improve. But I think it's just, being yourself. Like I said, just really, if you show your players that you care about them, at the end of the day, that's really what helps them. They want to know you care in those tough days, because there are going to be good days and there's going to be bad days too. And so wins, losses, different types of days present themselves. But if they know that you're in it with them and that you care about them and it's authentic, you can't get into that thing where you're treating them a certain way or doing certain things just to feel like you're doing a good job. Like, I feel like it's just do the right thing because it is the right thing. Treat them the right
Yeah,
way because it is, but I think sometimes in this profession, you can be tempted to do that because you're trying to get the next job, or, and it becomes more transactional. But I believe that if you just treat people the right way, and whatever happens is going to happen, do the right thing and you'll be rewarded for that in the end. So I think players are changing maybe here and there, but they're really the same as we were. They want to get better. They want to play at the highest possible level as they can. And when the ball stops bouncing, they want to know that, this game can provide them something.
right, right. Love that. So, speaking more about just players and relating to them, one of the coolest things that I noticed when I came to your practices was you're obviously not 6'9", but you were working with the bigs most of the time on the far end of of the baskets in practices, and I love that because I try to really like study post game play or wings, and just so that I can be more versatile as a coach, right? Because when guys look for someone, they typically look at someone they feel like they can relate to, but you have to be competent regardless of your history as a player. And how do you, or what is your perspective on player development, and then just the way that the industry has kind of uh, changed in the past 20 years? Because now capitalism has opened avenues for people like me and some of these other coaches here on this live to feed their families, where we're not working on a staff, for 6 to 8 months. We're just working with players individually. I know that some coaches don't really like the skill training industry. They don't really feel like trainers understand the game. Some partner with and collaborate with, but so what? I guess two questions. your perspective on player development, as in what you do, and then your perspective on the industry of player development.
Yeah, those are two good ones. I think number one, I'll answer the second one first. I
Okay.
think Atlanta, spending a lot of time in Atlanta, and I'll say Dallas is the same way, and Houston's DMV, actually, all these big cities. I think, you have so many layers of basketball now, which I personally think is awesome. Like, our guys, they go home and they might work out, with different trainers they've had in the past, and there's a comfort level that comes, when you hear them talk about guys they work out with and how comfortable they are with them and what they've learned. And when you hear a player say that, like, how can you not support that? And then how can you not try to work with them, to make sure that their workouts when they go back home maybe are, similar to what, things that they can be working on for when they get back.
Right.
But I think having those types of relationship are important. And that's how I view them. And I think, my personal view on it, I think it's when a guy walks on your campus, that's one of our biggest jobs as assistant coaches, spending time with them in the gym. And, whatever position that, you might be working with, you referenced me working with the bigs. I've worked with guards and wings, whatever position over the years. But, are you studying your craft? Are you trying to improve? Every off season is a big time to take another jump, just new things you might like that you might want to incorporate. Obviously you always try to make things game-like, but there's a time for just reps. Personally, I think there's a time for both. So whether that's pre-practice shooting might look a certain way, post-practice work might look another way. Okay, now we want to get game shots today. Okay, specific shots out of the offense and actions we're running. There's a time for that. Charting things, so numbers are involved in competition. And something I really have kind of fallen in love with lately is stacking things. So like, any kind of combination of things. So whether that's ball handling into a shot, into multiple shots, a sequence of shots that's stacked on each other. That's something recently I've tried to incorporate into everything that we're doing. And I just think that makes it more game-like. And but any way that you can make it fun at the same time, and a way that guys just constantly want to keep coming back for more, and you put a number on it and they lose the game, all right, they want to beat the game next time, finding time for that.
Yeah.
I think just incorporating all that, so it's not mundane.
Awesome. Awesome. Last one for me, and then coaches, I'm opening it up to you guys. So I hope you're ready. Coach Chris, talk about, because I follow you on social media. You're always, posting your girls, talk about your perspective on balancing family life and coaching. Is there a balance? We know the stats, like there's so many coaches who, their family life ends up in divorce, and, it's hard, especially like you explained earlier, if you have a spouse that doesn't come from that world, they didn't play sports or they've never coached. So how have you been able to maintain such a, from what it seems like, just a great foundation with your home life?
Yeah, I try to do the best I can. I can do better, at times at night. The biggest challenge for me is, just the recruiting piece has become 24/7, and you want to do a good job at that. And sometimes you can just be consumed with it, and before you know it, you've been on your phone for an hour, and that's the hour that you could be spending, with, your family. But I do try to be strategic. I luckily, work for a guy, Rob Lanier here at SMU. He lets us get out of the office when we can to spend time with our family. So, I try to be home for dinner when I can, hang out with our daughter, Olivia, for an hour until she goes to bed at least. And then when she goes to bed, make those recruiting calls, watch film, and then spend time with Heather as well. But it's something you have to strategically do, or else, you fool around and, you're not making the time that you should be making. Because I think, I do love coaching, but it's not more important than my family. And if I had to pick, I'm choosing my family and my wife and my daughter all day long. But I do think you can do both. I really do. I've worked for guys that have shown me you can do both. I've heard stories where it might not be like that, and I wouldn't want to put myself in that position. Just personally, being in the office till 11 midnight every night, not seeing them, I don't want that. I think you can win. I think you can be successful in coaching, even at this level, with a perspective and a balance with family.
Awesome. Awesome. So it's possible, ladies and gentlemen. So, all right, coaches, let's open it up to you guys. You can unmute yourselves if you have a question, anything for Coach Chris.
I have a question for Coach. How you doing, Coach? This is, Coach Sean Sherman. I think I met you before, if I'm not mistaken, on the AAU circuit. So you don't remember me, that's fine, but it's great to see you, and I'm happy for the success that you've had. Talked about a couple things. One was a lot of, I should say, authenticity, being authentic. You know, when people sniff out that you're not. In your authentic way, how do you relay a message to a player, something that you're not happy with, play, something off the court, you know, attitude, whatever it is, being yourself, how do you relay that to a player?
Great question.
Yeah, that's a good one. I think there's a self-awareness that you have to have, I think, as a coach. And I try to be self-aware. Like, I just know who I am. I'm not a yeller and a screamer. And I might be, you know, if I'm ever fortunate enough to be a head coach, I might be too nice at times. I know that about myself. So but I also do know that you have to be firm, and you have to get on guys, and you have to, when you see something that's not right, you have to do that. So back to your question, I think what I try to do is, within the gut feel that I have of what I know I have to say to that young man at that time, I try to think of, okay, how can I really get his attention, knowing where he's from, what he's done, what's worked, what hasn't. And so there's a trial and error part to it too, because, you know, for example, some guys don't like to be talked to a certain way, even if it's not crazy, just a certain tone just doesn't get across to some types of guys. So which is the best way? Is it in front of a group? Is it on the side with a certain guy? You know, just what is really going to get his attention? And I think trial and error sometimes is the best teacher for that. But there's just a gut feel that you have that, you know, yeah, this is how I'm going to do it. I'm going to hit him with this. Like, you think about it maybe for a day or two, and before you make any rash decisions. But I think the worst thing you can do is be rash and jump on him and emotional, and especially nowadays. So I just think they're going to respect you more if you just kind of think it through. But like I said, I know I'm on a certain side of the spectrum with that, just being how I am. But
Got you. Thank you,
Good
Coach.
stuff. Good stuff.
What's
Great
up?
question. Go ahead, Coach Josh. You got it.
Hey, what's up, Coach? Long time no see.
yeah, how you doing?
I'm blessed, man. How are you? I'm glad to see you doing great things. I have a question for you. I have a lot of kids that I train. They be like, "Hey, Coach, I'm a D1 player." I want to know, as an assistant coach, what is a D1 player? Like, what is that? Because a lot of times, you know, as skills coaches, we're not really knowing what a D1 player actually looks like. So from your perspective, what does that look like?
Man, 2 years ago, a D1 player looked a certain way. And now it's, I mean, between the transfer portal, I know everybody, that's how everybody answers this question nowadays. But I just think it's honestly, you know, in the past, a couple years ago, you know, 358 Division I schools or whatever the number was then. Now you take the portal, and now it's just become a numbers game. Right. And so in a vacuum, what's a Division I player? Man, in recruiting, what you always try to do, what I learned this from CY, who, like I said, at Georgia Southern gave me my first opportunity. You always try to recruit a level above of where you're at, a level to 2 levels above. So if you're in a low major league and you're trying to win the league, you need a mid to mid plus guy, or 2 of them. If you're in the ACC, you need a pro or 2. And that's really how you try to do it. So back to your question, though, I just think now, you take the international, the high school guys, the prep school guys, the junior college guys, and now you throw in the portal, And now everybody's thinking the same thing. I need a level or two better. Well, just your eyes will tell you an older transfer is going to give me that level quicker or easier. And especially someone, you know, that hasn't transferred yet and they can transfer play right away. It's just become a thing where maybe in 2 years it gets back to what it used to be. But I just think right now it's hard to even answer your question, because there are guys that are not going to sign at a Division I school this year that 2 years ago would have played mid-major basketball, in my opinion. Like they'll go another route. They'll go to prep school. And maybe, you know, I just think there's a trickle down effect that has changed it. But I mean, athletically, guys look a certain way, bodies, grown men. I mean, that's what you're looking for. It's just like the business has turned into win right away. Back in the day, it was you had 5 years to get it done. And now like 5-year contract, but you got 3 years to get it done. You know, so everybody has kind of sped up this process of we need impact guys. And it used to be JUCO was the way to go for that. And now it's transfer. So the typical high school, it's a tough time for them. I feel for them, but I think, you know, it'll work itself out if they stick with it and just find that right next landing spot.
Appreciate
That's a
that.
great question. Great question. I think most skilled trainers probably need to hear that, Coach Chris, like just you breaking down the numbers game. And then, of course, also the most important piece, Josh, that I think he touched on fairly quickly was the athleticism piece. Like you can have kids who have skill, they have ability, or they have a great work ethic, but just Coach Chris, you played on the D3 level. I played on the D3 level. Like we had games where we would play money games. You play up D2 or you play a D1. And it wasn't that they were that much better than you IQ-wise. It was just the speed. It was their ability to react. It was how they cover ground so much quicker than the average player. So a lot of times, and this is just my perspective, Chris can veto it, but I can teach a kid who's got raw talent and ability in the body if I've got 2-3 years with them. But if I got a 5'7", 5'9", even a 6'1", 6'2", but he's not a freak athlete, it's going to take a lot more for him to compensate for the lack of athleticism and talent and just raw ability. Does that make sense? So I'm not saying a kid can't be D1 without it.
Right.
Got plenty of them out there who have been successful. I mean, you got Aaron Kraft, but you know that's that old school Division I, like Coach Chris was talking about. So for those kids, you can't break their heart. You can't tell them, no, you know, you have no chance. But maybe you show them examples of what it looks like. Take them to a game. You know, Georgia State's right up the street. You know, Life University's in Marietta. That's D3, I think, NAIA.
Yeah,
you know, help them see the various levels. And like Coach Chris said, their eyes won't lie to them. They will understand the difference between a Georgia State, a Georgia Tech, so on and so forth.
I got one more question, Coach.
Yep.
What turns you off on a player? Like what turns you off? Like, you know, on a certain level, you know, like I know like a lot of times it's kids' body language or whatever. So what is your perspective on a kid that just turns you off? Like, what does that look like?
Yeah, let me I missed something real with your other question before I answer that. I think, but definitely back in the day when redshirting was a thing, but even, you know, you always tried to, you have an eye, you know, in recruiting, you always try to have an eye for guys that were late bloomers. So, you know, just over my, you know, career, like there are guys like shooting is one that if a kid can really shoot the ball, back to your Division I question, like shooting, size, like is his dad tall? Does he have big feet? Is he done growing? Is he not? Like there's a couple guys in my career that I either wrote off because they were small, but all of a sudden he grew. So, you know, I missed a couple things. I say shooting, and then just knowing the kid's story, like, is he growing? Is he a late bloomer? This. And then your question about what's a turnoff. One, anyone that, is disrespectful to coaching or doesn't take coaching or not a good teammate, kind of those category of things really turn off. 2, if they don't love the game. So if you start sniffing around and coaches are like, yeah, coach, I mean, he's going to be good, but I just can't get him in the gym. And, he doesn't work at it. Those are red flags. You try to collect all this information, and you start listening for context clues. And so when you hear things like not really loving it, that's a turn off. And then something in the last couple of years personally that scares me is guys that love recruiting a little too much. That's a little bit of a red flag, because especially with this transfer thing,
Right.
3 different schools or 4 different schools in 4 years, you got to look at that. Because just you try to evaluate, is it going to, is this young man going to be a transfer risk? But just, do they love the game? Do they work at it? If you hear anything negative like that, there's other things. Toughness is something you look for. So guys that aren't tough, aren't competitive, those are some other things that might strike them off the list.
Appreciate that, Coach. Really do appreciate that.
No, for sure, man. Those are good questions.
Great question. When you say love recruiting, Chris, dive into that a little bit more, because I feel like that's a hot topic. That's a trigger.
Yeah, that's like, I try to put myself, growing up, we didn't have social media, and I feel like a lot of this stuff, I know I did it. You check the paper the next day for scores, like who's, doing what, who won, who lost, who's killing, who's not. But you did it in the paper the next day or like a week later. And now, or you watch the news to, the 11 o'clock news after a Friday night, of games. But man, just we get so many emails and texts and DMs and all that. And, once you start recruiting a kid, you might, you sense, where you are at on the totem pole and, the interests or the offers they might have at the time. But then they keep trying to, stir up other stuff. And then they, it's like a dating comparison. You can tell you're not, you're like 3rd on the list or 4th on the list. And you start just getting the feel for like, man, they just want to be recruited. They're not really looking for the right fit. And so now it might net out where they want to come to your institution and it's a good fit. And then you can feel good about that. But sometimes, in this profession, you try to stay in the game just because that person might be highly ranked, or you just got to be careful with all that stuff, because the truth's going to come out in the end. And you just want guys that are looking for the right situations. I think back to certain situations of guys that reached out to us. Hey, come watch me play. We went and watched them play. We liked them. We offered them and they committed. And they're doing really well because they wanted what we had. We liked what we saw, and we made a move, and they made the move, right back. But when you get into this song and dance, and all right, now what? And well, we just want to see what, and that's where it gets a little tricky.
Got you. Coaches, any more questions before we wrap up?
One last one, Coach.
Go ahead, Sean.
You mentioned the fact that, volunteered at first, in being an assistant, you travel, you move around a lot. And you said your wife, gave the blessing, so to speak. How did you feel? Well, I don't want to get too personal, but how did you sell that to her? I mean, was it just that, that's my husband, I love him, he has a dream, he has a vision, so forth and so on. But how did you sell that, the fact that you were going to volunteer? And hopefully that leads to something bigger than volunteering. You know what I mean?
Yeah, good question. You can get personal if you want to. No problem here. But it's crazy, man. Like, she had no idea. When I say no idea, she had no idea what it involved. 0. And so coaching high school, I remember early on, she was like, just had 2 games a week and no travel, no nothing. And that was a lot to her. And I'm like, babe, I got to go to the game. Like,
Right.
But so once we did the college thing, it was Division II, it was different. And she started to see, she thought she knew, but that was a wake-up call. So all along, I was like, I don't know if this is going to work. But I was always going to choose her. It was never like, I'm doing this no matter what.
Right.
So then when the Georgia Tech opportunity presented itself, she was like, no, let's do it.
Okay.
And then each step of the way from here on out, from then on out, it was, yeah, let's do it. And I was, really? You're okay leaving Atlanta? Like, I know you're from here, like your mom's here, and yeah, like this is what you wanted to. And so can you plead your case? Like, I don't know your situation, but I think you just have to be careful. I'm putting myself in like, if for whatever reason she had any pushback, I might have had to make a really tough decision.
Right.
But I know what I would have chose because I know what she is to me. So, I think that you can always tell them, like, look, I promise I'm doing, like, when I can come home, I'm coming home.
Right.
I'm not just sitting in the office, but like there are times when I got to be there and I got to go on this recruiting trip. And then if you can make time when you can, like you can offset, some of that time that you miss with some quality time. So it's definitely something that it takes a special woman for sure.
Yeah.
Certain levels of basketball. Cause high school, even AAU, like it's a big time commitment.
Well, was it part of the last part of the question? Was it the fact that you talked about how hard you have to work and just seeing you around Atlanta some years ago? Did she see, what he's investing, he's working? She didn't see laziness. Was that a big part of it as well? How driven you were to your craft?
I taught high school Spanish for 3 years, and she could tell that didn't really I did it, but she could tell I wasn't passionate about that. I waited tables before that. She knew I wasn't passionate about that. She's seen me do some other things that she knew I wasn't passionate about, but she knew that this was something I wake up every day and I want to do. And yeah, she gave her blessing on that.
Okay. Appreciate it, Coach.
For sure, man.
Powerful, powerful. Coaches, anything else? I don't want to cut anybody short. Y'all been asking great questions.
I mean, Coach Sean, I can agree with that. I got 3 kids of my own and a wife that, ANU is a lot. Not being home, like even training with Corey, sometimes I'm in a doghouse just because I want to be out there. But, like you said, I think every wife that is a basketball coach, who's with a basketball coach, makes that sacrifice. So, I pray for opportunity that, one day I'll get that blessing from her. Like, hey, we in this situation where, hey, my kids are comfortable. We good. Like, so that's my thing is just keep praying, like, your wife will let up a little bit, But I got 3 babies, so I'm not in that comfortable position just yet.
Hey, those 3 babies are the most important thing in the world, man.
They are. So that's what drives me. Sometimes like Corey tells me, like, you can't do that right now. You got your kids, you got this. You can't take that opportunity. But Coach, I do have one more question to ask you. One is a good opportunity to take a position, and one is not a good opportunity to take a question. Like, you had an opportunity to volunteer, but you and your wife had to sit down and make that decision. Like, this is the best decision for me. So, what does that process look like?
Yeah,
you don't mind me asking.
Yeah, I think that's like my first job was actually at the University of Great Falls, an NAIA school in Montana. And I was young, I was right out of college, and looking back, it was I did it, but it was probably not the smartest thing financially, but I just did it because I was chasing it. And, now that when you're married and you have kids and you got a family, I just think now you have to be very strategic. Like you were saying, Corey, telling you, hey, now's not the time. Like, you have to really think out, like, play it forward and say, okay, I do this, I'm making this, I got to, here my, just budget wise, I think you got to think that way, and you don't want to dig yourself a hole financially, but this is a profession where you do have to take a step back at times to take a step forward. I do know that. I volunteered for 2 years, coached high school, and, paid my dues a little bit. And just because I paid my dues, that doesn't mean that I was going to be granted another opportunity. Like, it's one of those professions, like Heather, my wife, is in the business sector. And she tells me all the time, like, the business world does not work like y'all's world at all. Like, you don't take steps back like that. Or, for instance, we were at George Mason for 4 years, and all of a sudden we get let go, and I'm looking for a job, and I went after like 14 jobs and didn't get any of them. And then I'm just sitting at my table one night, and old college coach calls me and said, "Hey, Dan Earl at VMI's, finishing up his staff. Would you want to talk to him?" And that's how I got a job. Like, so the profession is just funky. So to answer your question, when you are presented with an opportunity, I think you do the pros and cons thing. I think you play it forward and say, okay, if I do this, I can do this for a year, or I can do this for 2 years. But I also think that you play it even further forward and you say, okay, in 5 years, this is what I really want to be doing. If you want to be in the college world in 5 to 10 years, then you better get your foot in the door in the college world as soon as possible. If you want to be a head high school coach, then you get into the high school world, working for the right guy, or working at a job where you can maybe get another job. You got to be very strategic. If it's women's basketball, get in that world, because every world is different and it's hard to jump worlds. And so I think if you can be strategic about that, it can help too. But you can't map it out. I mean, that's impossible. But you can be smart about doing something, because I think the worst thing you can do is take a job because get emotional and just do it without thinking it through. And then a year later, you're just, in a worse place in a lot of different ways than you were before. So I just think a lot of it's timing. And then the other thing is just be careful who you work for, like, in my opinion. Just work for guys that are going to treat you the right way, take care of you. If your family's important, guys are going to let you see your family. I just think there's so many things that you got to think of, but you do have to be in a situation, like, let's just say it's college, where you can move. Like, in the spring, I always tell guys, like, I don't know if you have a house or rent or whatever, like, you got to be able to move fast sometimes. Like, sometimes I've gotten a job where it's like, all right, I got to go. Like, got to go like a week later, 2 days later. So it's such a funky profession, but.
Appreciate that, Coach.
Gems. A lot of gems in that one. Coaches, anything else? Y'all are coming with it, man. Y'all are coming with it. Well, Coach, if you got any closing remarks, any type of advice for the guys, you kind of know a lot of the backgrounds and the situations, anything that you think could help them in their journeys.
Yeah, no, first of all, I appreciate y'all's time, man, and all the questions. It was great talking to y'all tonight. Corey, I appreciate this. I think, we've talked over the years just about, your journey to, just overseas to this. And, I think it's really cool what you're doing. And I think, the longer we coach, the more people we come across and meet, and as networks develop, I just think that's what it's all about too. I think, obviously I'm here in Dallas right now. So if I can ever, do anything for you guys out this way, let me know. I'll be back in Atlanta at some point here soon, recruiting. But, I just think the perspective when I hit you with that, it was just more because I'm very thankful to be here at SMU working for a guy that, he brought our whole staff, with him, and from Georgia State. So we had success last year, and, not everybody would do that, but he brought us, along for the ride, and he has a sense of perspective about him, which allows me as an assistant to have perspective in my life. Because like I was telling you guys, like, when you work for a guy that doesn't, that's when it's hard as an assistant, so we're all connected, in this profession. Like, when whoever you're working for, he sets the tone, and Coach Lanier really does a good job of having perspective on a daily basis with our team, with our staff. And it's just been a lot of fun, just working for him. And so just wanted to extend whatever you guys need in Dallas at SMU, man. Let us know anytime, you're in town, and however I can help, let me know.
Coach Chris, how can everybody stay connected with you and kind of follow your coaching journey? Is it social media? Is it email? What's the best form of contact?
Yeah, social media is fine. Coach Kreider, Kreider. But yeah, just anything, it's not just about recruiting or coaching. I mean, life, whatever. I just think that's really what this whole thing's about, using basketball to do so much more like you're doing, Corey.
Coach Chris, thank you again. It's an honor. It's a pleasure. I'm definitely going to be keeping up with how you guys continue to progress as a team and how you guys finish off this season. Thank you again just for your time, because I know this is family time, and I know that's super important to you. So we don't want to steal any more of that. But coaches, thank you also for taking the time. I know it's late. Everybody, much love. God bless to you guys. January 17th, we're having our next call with DJ White from OKC, and be on the lookout for the next mentorship group Zoom. So love you guys, man. Y'all enjoy your night. Coach Chris,
All right, fellas.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks, Coach. Thanks, Coach.
Y'all have a good night.
Have a good one.
All right.